Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. Let's hop in here. So today is Monday, October 24th. We're burning through October fairly quickly from my perspective. Apparently we have new gates in solo mode, but I did realize that since I spent extra gems buying things in the shop and doing secret packs, that once again left me in a weird position where if I was to come in here and try and do more of the solo mode stuff, I am probably going to unlock a secret pack and then not have enough crystals, gems to use it. But I'm probably getting to the point where I need to do that anyways. It's just not going to even be an option. And at a certain point, maybe you're getting a little bit more rewards by doing the solo mode content. I still kind of feel like the solo mode content just feels weird, for lack of a better term. It's trying to be a single player element to a game that is really 100% multiplayer. And it's not really the greatest of single player elements at that level anyways. We may get close to 31 here, but I bet I've missed a couple of days. Like, I'm just not consistently doing this. And also I don't think I think I've filled this up, so I may have missed a daily quest here. 6 days to do the solo mode, and 3 days to link summon another 14 monsters and see just as far as we can get with this festival, this regulation duel stuff. Like, 2 more wins, I get to Platinum 5, which is nice. I think I played a little bit of this off screen. Get to Platinum 5, you get the card back, you get 100 gems. Then it's just a struggle to get to Platinum 1 to get another title. And then it would just be a struggle to get the Diamond 1, which doesn't seem like I'd probably put enough time into this. So for the accountability section, I finished Sexy Brutale, and much to my shock, there is no speedrun mode in the game, or there's no save everybody in one run in the game, since the whole game is around reliving the same 12 hours over and over again to save people from being killed and in ridiculous fashions. So, like, it definitely felt like the game absolutely needed a final challenge to say you have now 12 hours to be able to save everybody before the game is over. But when you do save somebody, it just stops the time flow and resets you back after the first time. And even the first time, it stops the time flow and resets you back. So there's no way around it. So instead of having kind of an amazing reveal that Sexy Brutale really should have, it's kind of a boring reveal. And then I ended up making one really long cleanup episode at the end that was like 3 hours long, when I was making 45-minute long episodes before then, just trying to find all the playing cards, which the playing cards are kind of a nightmare, just in the fact that there's no system in the game that tells you which playing cards you're looking for. So you absolutely need to have a checklist and mark off the Ace of Spades, for instance, when you pick up the Ace of Spades, because if you are going to have to go and look up any kind of walkthrough or help to figure out where the Three of Spades is, for instance, you won't know that you're missing the Three of Spades. It will just say that you have 51 out of 52 cards found. And so inevitably I had to go to all 52 locations in a walkthrough to find the 3 or 4 remaining cards. And there's a whole element in the game that I will spoil for Sexy Brutale because it doesn't change much, in that some fireplaces start unlit and then the bad guys over the 12 hours will light the fireplaces. So you have to actually go to the fireplaces before they're lit to get 3 of the 52 cards. Most of the other cards are just lying on the floor or in a chest or somewhere. A lot of the ones that are lying on the floor are just visually hard to see. So there was definitely a couple that I just had walked past multiple times and not seen. But collecting all the cards gives you a different ending, and nothing else more than that, really. It definitely feels like a game that has three endings, roughly 3 endings. I'd say really 2 endings, just because it may have been contractually obligated to make multiple endings. It's not a game that benefits from having multiple endings. Now, to say something nice about Sexy Brutale, it's a decent game. It's totally worth playing, with the caveat of having kind of a walkthrough for the cards. The collectibles really shouldn't be there. Oh, maybe I should have used this ability. But yeah, it's still way better than Zero Time Dilemma, where Zero Time Dilemma has major issues as far as not really having great gameplay and having a story that just goes wild and crazy in multiple directions. Sexy Brutale is kind of wild and crazy in its depiction, but it all makes sense as one thematic story at the end, whereas the Nonary game series and the Zero Time Dilemma third game in the Nonary series doesn't have one specific theme in the end that makes sense. There's no single moving factor as to why there are robots and why there are cults and why there are viruses and disease and terrorists and all of this at the same time, and why there are alien transporters and morphogenetic fields and jumping to different timelines. Like, there's just so much stuff that just would be the central focus of a better written story that are just thrown away as kind of nothing. In the Zero Time Dilemma. But after playing Sexy Brutale, it still left me fairly yearning for a time manipulation game that maybe made a little bit more sense and maybe even had a little bit more action. At a certain point, if I was going to go down on that theme even further, go down the path of that theme any further, I would probably start moving towards something like the Prince of Persia Sands of Time series, where the rewind mechanic becomes just something you can do and isn't that thematically important to the actions. Or you could start to shift away from the time rewind mechanism and just have scheduled AI characters that walk in specific places at specific times, and play something like the Metal Gear series or any other kind of stealth game with scripted times in which you're supposed to move. either way, that gets fairly far away from Zero Time Dilemma and would be too much. So instead I started playing Darkest Dungeon. And what's really a shame so far, like 2 episodes slash close to 4 hours into Darkest Dungeon, is that if it weren't for the fact that all of the new content in Darkest Dungeon has probably been made, and I will in a second complain about how that new content was made and delivered. It's the visuals that are also a problem. Otherwise, Darkest Dungeon, in its gameplay mechanics, being turn-based and being single-player, would be a great replacement for something like Yu-Gi-Oh! And Master Duel, where I could all of a sudden not have to worry about the other person playing, and could just play at my own pace and then get distracted and then talk about something and then come back to that whole conversation later, or come back to the game with no penalty. But unfortunately, it does not quite work out that way. The dark visuals of Darkest Dungeon doesn't work, so I'd have to find something that was a Darkest Dungeon clone, fairly consistent to a Darkest Dungeon clone, and that was more visually bright. But then I would still really need it to be something that is just constantly getting updates, or does have some kind of online mechanic that's more played than the Dark Circus that is played, or I imagine it's played in Darkest Dungeon. And so it would be kind of a hard-based hard concept to try and find a Darkest Dungeon clone as popular, if not more popular, than Darkest Dungeon, that doesn't have dark visuals, that is constantly getting updated, that has an online component, that's still turn-based. Yeah. That is certainly asking quite a lot. I thought Darkest Dungeon was a deck builder card game, but there are actually no cards in it, so I don't know what game I was even thinking of. But Darkest Dungeon, even on easy, is kind of brutally hard as far as you can waste your money very easily by overbuying provisions at the beginning. And I don't know if even on easy there's a great guarantee that you can even beat the main narrative, beat the Darkest Dungeon, as it were. It can be slow in certain elements, in particular, where you just aren't going to move that fast, and it's a mess of a menu system that you really have to play with a mouse and probably a keyboard, and a lot of times you're going to need to reach for a keyboard button. It does have controller support, but you would just be menuing over things left and right. It's Darkest Dungeon really is a far cry away from Diablo as a game that came out many years earlier, where you're just left clicking and right clicking in Diablo, and then you have your hand over like 1, 2, 3, and 4 as far as the keyboard. And I would really compare it to Diablo, even though it plays turn-based and looks, its fight sequences look different. Well, we may be stuck at this point. I'd like to get to Platinum, but if I play all of today and can't get to Platinum even, then it's probably worth it to mostly give up. The main complaint, though, by far that I have with Darkest Dungeon is that most of the people I think that enjoyed Darkest Dungeon and made it popular in the first place were playing it in early access. I think it had a prolonged period in which it would have been what I would call early access. And then when they finally wanted to add more content, they did it by selling a ton of DLC. Unfortunately, all the DLC makes significant changes to what the experience from the beginning of the game is to the end, sometimes making the game even harder, because people who were fans of Darkest Dungeon had already played it all the way through multiple times. It's not the standalone DLC where they're giving you separate dungeons that the new players wouldn't want to access or engage with. It's just complicating the existing experience to make it more interesting to people who have already seen all the tricks, which inherently means playing in 2022 with Darkest Dungeon and having purchased all the DLC is way different than playing in its initial months of launch in like 2016, I think is when it came out. And so there's just like a lot, frankly, a lot of tutorialization. I'm like at the 3rd or 4th week, and I still suspect that there's a lot of tutorialization still happening. There's a bunch of buildings still to be unlocked. Trying to figure out the best way to collect enough people in your roster of fighters to cycle them in and out of churches and taverns to release their stress. Trying to figure out why there's such an emphasis on having the torches brightly lit, but then there's no option just to auto relight a torch when it goes down. The stress system, I'm not 100% sold on. I don't know if it doesn't just hurt the game quite a bit. It's an odd different system in which stress at 200 guarantees death, but health at 0 just puts you at death's door, and then you have a random chance of dying if your health is at 0. That seems weird, certainly, as a way to kind of cheat characters dying a lot. But the entire game is built around the idea that your characters will die, and that, like it really says at the beginning, it's about making the best out of a bad situation, which doesn't really encourage a new player to try and play Darkest Dungeon all the way to the end. Otherwise, for the accountability section, I'll say I'm still wasting a lot of time playing Marvel Snap, and it's not getting better. I'm seeing more cards, so it does feel like what happens is, as people are still playing it, they are getting mystery card rewards when they level up, and those mystery card rewards are probably different for different players. But I know the total number of cards that exist, and I know it's not that big. So Marvel Snap is almost certainly going to have to start to make a whole second wave of cards before they even hit like a 4-month anniversary. And it can't just be a bunch of it really can't just be a bunch of skins for already existing cards. It needs to be new cards. And the fact that it needs to be new cards creates the problem of its new cards needing to have new abilities. Yeah. They could certainly get away with making an extension or an expansion in Marvel Snap that has like half of the characters just having no abilities, but what they're going to quickly run into is that they're going to have something that has one attack and one attack with no abilities, and then they're just going to make something else that has one attack and one attack with no abilities, and so it's just going to be a art swap with a different character instead of a variant on the same character. And the variants right now are just 8-bit versions of the they're just 8-bit versions of the existing cards, which is not the most interesting like skin you could make. But as for the actual game, it's giving like a ridiculous amount of extra daily quests every 7 or 8 hours. But the daily quests are not so short or simple that you would get them done in 10 or 20 minutes, or that you would play them over you would get a daily quest done in 1 or 2 games. You're gonna play 3, 4, 5 games minimum to get most of the daily quests done. They're trying to keep things interesting by cycling in different locations, but locations are just never going to be that interesting. So yeah, I'm still wasting time playing Marvel Snap just because it's installed on my phone, and same is true for the Goblins mining game, which I have no business playing. And then Destiny Child is in a different setup where it's promising more updates. That I think what's happened in Destiny Child is either they're speeding up the process of converting things that were in the Korean version of the game and the Japanese version of the game. They're speeding up, moving those to global to get to be quicker to being done with Destiny Child, and just kind of abandoning it, which I hope is not the case. Or they just crossed a line in which the global version of the game has finally caught up, because they were doing that even before Nikkei was really a thing. And Nikkei still isn't out. Project Nikkei is still not out on cell phones. It's getting closer, I suspect, but they're still trying to drum up hype around it. But yeah, it could be that they just have caught up to global to the rest of the Japanese version and the Korean version, and so now it's just them slowly putting in systems that have existed for a year or 2 or 3 in the other versions into the global versions, which makes the game finally easier to play. The crossover collaboration is over either now or in a couple of hours or in a couple days, and I was able to get each of those those characters in the crossover collaboration, but I doubt I'll do anything with them, and there wasn't really anything too special around it. So it does seem like it was a weird collab that I just hope got shift up some extra money as advertisement. And at this point, if anybody was going to come into Destiny Child as a new player with a new account, I think you're going to really suffer to a point where I don't think it's probably going to be worth it. Like, it would be better to just wait and play Nikke instead and hope Nikke goes in the same direction. I wouldn't be surprised if Nikke actually doesn't. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a slight lewdness to Nikke with the anime waifus, but that's as far as it goes. Did I do anything else? I'm still working on my guest Wi-Fi thing. Part of the thing that I'm running into with it is really just I need to type up some numbers and change the numbers, and the typing is the boring stuff. So why did I do that? That was dumb. Could have just done this. I guess I might have been able to use this to destroy that before it activates. I did find that my crone jobs, which is the old way in which you would schedule things, were just not working for the backups, and so I moved them over to systemd services instead and scheduled them to run both daily and monthly as far as backups, and hopefully that will work. Although at a certain point it doesn't account for what I'd really like to do, which is have the monthly backup to the USB hard drive happen before the daily backups on the days that it runs. Which probably means I need to do some more investigation as far as how is the best way to schedule and use the scheduling aspects of systemd services, which are not as well known to me. So I'm hoping that'll work and get the backups actually working. I very possibly need to tell the Borg backup server software to use a limited amount of bandwidth instead of trying to shift all the backups as quickly as possible, but that may not really matter either. Let's see. Can't activate this, can't do anything here, can't do anything here in the turn, and probably lose. But yeah, I do feel like I'm getting closer towards being satisfied and being done with the guest Wi-Fi setups, but there's still some tweaks I need to do with it. And then, yeah, I'm still watching a lot of streaming stuff, as it were. I finished watching, or barely paying any attention really, to Better Off Ted on Hulu, which I don't know why people like that show as much as I think people were talking about it. Although in all fairness, nobody's talking about it now, so maybe it was just a thing of a sign of the times. It is very possible that Better Off Ted was either an Office clone, which would have interested people who liked The Office, the American version of The Office, or it came out slightly before the American version of The Office, and then it would make some sense there too.
But yeah, I certainly didn't see anything there for its 2 seasons that it ran. And I can't even remember what else I even watched. Which more and more that is the real concern, is that if I'm just watching absolute garbage that's going in one ear and out the other, that's a real problem. Plus, that's the kind of content that I would like to have playing in the background when I'm scheduling videos, and I'm not really scheduling videos at all. Speaking of YouTube, YouTube says announced that they're going to change the look of a lot of things. The subscribe button is going from being red to a more rounded button that is white and more prominent. Maybe that will get more people to subscribe. I doubt it. They're getting rid of the blue highlight for hashtags. But the hashtags still, I think, would be searchable, if not clickable, whatever they are now. They're getting rid of links being actual links. So going forward, like a link to my Patreon will probably just say Patreon on and have a button on it. And then they're going for just rounded corners in general. The dark mode is going to be darker, which is a funny thing to say. And they're going to have an ambient mode that kind of blurs the colors on the edges of a video behind the text. So yeah, just an overall visual tweaks, which I can't really complain about visual tweaks on YouTube. YouTube has been fairly consistently visually the same for many years, so a slight visual change, particularly on the end user end, doesn't sound awful. Some people definitely will hate it, other people won't care. It almost certainly might be accompanied with some sneaky change to get rid of the dislike button, or completely, or something like that, or hide it somewhere else. But they didn't say anything like that. Now, inevitably, the fact that YouTube has been secretly working on visual changes of YouTube instead of working on just less ads, better monetization, better content, better way for content creators to be successful as a YouTube content creator is annoying, but that will always be the case, that's annoying. I honestly do believe that there is going to be a real problem with YouTube in 5-10 years as more and more people just get burned out and stop doing YouTube. Unless we get something like universal basic income or something, or just something along that lines. I don't see how the next generation of content creators are going to be able to show up and do anything, or even get that 1,000 subscribers that are needed, plus 10,000 watch hours or whatever it is, to get monetized. They're just going to be so under the thumb of the algorithm by older videos and people who have already just been established, like PewDiePie. Meanwhile, we even now can see that the likes of PewDiePie and some of the other people have just been able to multiple times, it's like several times a year pretty much, where somebody pretty big on YouTube that was a content creator comes out and says, hey, I'm taking a break, hey, I'm slowing down, hey, I'm making less content, and it's just constantly the cry of these successful YouTubers now is that they have gotten comfortable because they're getting a decent amount of money, or they've gotten burned out. Either way, the people that the algorithm is suggesting, and this is where it's the algorithm's fault, are making less content. And that's why when you look at a suggested feed, or at least when I look at my suggested feed, I very often have these entire runs of the YouTube algorithm just suggesting me videos that it clearly knows and shows that I've watched 100% of it. And very rarely do I want to go back and watch something that I've already seen 100% of. Like, if I was going to want and go back and watch it again, it would be in my watch later playlist or one of my other playlists. This is going to be interesting to see if special summon that there. And sure, I guess there is a possibility as far as YouTube, as I'm really just talking here and being kind of laid back for a Monday. I suppose there's a possibility that YouTube Shorts could open the door to a lot of YouTube Shorts creators, but I don't think that there's a long-term plan there. I shouldn't have activated that. I'm gonna end up banishing my own card. But yeah, YouTube Stories, YouTube Shorts, those are all just also ran ideas that YouTube is copying from other people. I don't think that there is enough of a concept there to make a whole career around trying to make YouTube Shorts or YouTube Stories. Alright, well, let's go through the video game news. Oh yeah, one other thing I did as far as the accountability section is I did reprogram my macros. So no longer are we going to be looking at games that have coming soon as their release date. The percentage of games that say coming soon and then I never hear another word about them is far too high, and I'm just not willing to give people quarter, as it were. I guess that's a phrase I could use. I'm not willing to give games the benefit of the doubt if they're not willing to pick a day and list it when they make their Steam page. Does that mean that potentially 30, 40, 50% of all games that come out on Steam are now going to be skipped? Maybe, but are they really even games is the question you have to ask, because if they never actually come out, they may just be ambitions for games. They may just be collections of screenshots. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of them are never intended to actually come out, and that they are just game developers stealing the money and then making a Steam page and saying, see, we made the game, it's coming out soon, and then they disappear before they actually release it. Like, that's a possibility, or at least that's a paranoid thought I'm having. Certainly, is that there could be some instances of fraud, straight up, as far as people taking a publisher's money, pretending like they made a game when they didn't, and then fleeing. Although, I have not heard a lot of stories of publishers really doing business with no-name small individuals, but I could see certainly being a no-name small indie developer and getting a bunch of, quote, friends and family to give you money towards the making of a game and just taking the money and running. So, I don't know why we're at the GameDeveloper.com articles first. That means I need to scroll back, doesn't it? Yes. The scrolling is still very wonky on this. So, yeah, this is where we stopped last Friday. And so this is our GameDeveloper.com article. And we're just waiting for the other player to play. And so this was also an article we'd already talked about, I'm fairly certain. Kerbal Space Program 2 coming out February 24th, 2023. Receiving large updates in the months following release. Which, why not just have the game all released at the same time and not do an early access at all? Particularly for a game that is the sequel to another game. Shouldn't there be no early access, or shouldn't you consider the first game the early access? Like, I still have yet to really hear as far as what would have changed so drastically in Kerbal Space Program 2 to make it a better experience, like a better physics engine or a better visuals or graphics or something like that. Even a shift from like Unreal Engine 3 to 4 or 4 to 5 really doesn't by default make me assume that it's going to be have a significant change. Here we have a new story, Star Wars Eclipse, which I have not heard of until just now, will reportedly include a new race and focus on political conflict. This is Video Games Chronicles. See if we can get this video to play. I guess the question does come down to, do you... Oh yeah, this was the Star Wars Eclipse. This was the one that was set in the past, like thousands of years in the past of the Star Wars world. And yet still they have kind of space flying ships and things like that. So the question I guess to ask is, how many people who are Star Wars fans enjoy the political intrigue of Star Wars, or even specifically enjoy the alien races of Star Wars. At a certain point, I think way more Star Wars fans are interested in droids than other alien races. There are specific characters that people like, but as far as the Star Wars movies go, there is actually a fairly heavy focus and liking of your standard humanoid or human characters. Not even humanoids. It is just humans. And then every other character that's like a puppet is mostly ignored. Jar Jar Binks is like a character that you recognize, but he's not on the screen as much as you would think. as far as humanoid races that aren't puppets, that are there's only a couple that I can even think of. There's like the blue lady with the tentacle hair, and then there's like the red lady with the tentacle hair, and that's, I think, pretty much it. Yep, as far as humanoid characters I care about, Chewbacca, certainly I guess is humanoid, but so furry and hairy that you really wouldn't think of them as humanoids. And Chewbacca certainly, I think, has become way less popular in favor of other characters. So yeah, at a certain point, that announcement doesn't make me any more interested in Star Wars games, but I don't know what really would, as not the biggest of Star Wars fans in the first place. I'm not really even a fan at all of Star Wars. I don't hate it by any means, but I just don't care about it. Which is kind of the right place to be at this point, where it's like, I really don't care at all about any of the Star Wars stuff. I only care about 2 out of what is probably now 12 Star Trek series and a couple of Star Trek movies. And then I still kind of have this nostalgic love for Babylon 5, but even then, it's not like I've gone back and watched Babylon 5 in 10 years. So, like, this, if the Babylon 5 remake ever did actually happen, I wouldn't be surprised if I didn't sit through it and didn't watch it. Or if I did sit through it and watch it, and found it to be not as interesting as I would hope. There is an interesting argument, certainly, around maturity level. Because even something that would have been like Babylon 5 is definitely, I think, more of a mature sci-fi story when it came out 10, 20, maybe even 30 years ago. The world has just changed so much, and that's not to say that I'd want Babylon 5 to have a Donald Trump reference and just cover modern politics, but there is just a level of maturity where if I went back and watched Babylon 5 right now, it probably is going to feel a little chintzy, feel a little kiddie. I would put it as like a college kids level of sci-fi, not a deep, complicated sci-fi. And so you would want to potentially not change too much of Babylon 5, or at least I think you'd want to do that, but you'd want it to be more realistic and a little bit more mature, for lack of a better term, something targeting a 30-year-old, whereas the original Babylon 5 might have been targeting a 20-year-old, because that's where your fandom is going to be at this point. Although, in all fairness, there are definitely next generation Star Trek Next Generation episodes that were written very mature and for very old people, and a lot of people that pretty much needed to have been in the military service to get all the details and all of the importance of things, like that drumhead episode in Star Trek Next Generation, where they have a drumhead court case, for instance. That's just like really really mature of a narrative, and that would probably play pretty much exactly the same today as it did when it first aired. Hmm. And I would hope, and I think most of Babylon 5 still plays pretty much at the same level. Whereas if you look at like Battlestar Galactica, the first Battlestar Galactica versus the remake of Battlestar Galactica, that is exactly what I'm thinking about as far as maturity. I don't know why I'm talking about TV here. Yep, these streams are about me talking about whatever I want to talk about to some extent, so sorry. But yeah, the first Battlestar Galactica, clearly a sci-fi show for little kids. Clearly way too simplistic, and the remake brings it several decades ahead to a realistic experience. Maybe in that case it was a little too dark and a little too gritty, but it worked very well, certainly. And the Lost in Space Netflix series does the same thing, whereas I would say Lost in Space kind of drops the ball at the very end of its third season and becomes a little too kid friendly. It otherwise does it fairly well. Also, Lost in Space manages to not become so dark and grim like Battlestar Galactica that it still feels like an experience that you could have your kids watching, which you lose that in the Battlestar Galactica remake. And I guess it is also notable to say that the Lost in Space series is on Netflix is probably not going to get any prequels or sequels or anything like that. So, through that aspect, this isn't going to work. Yeah, through that aspect, you're going to have a complete feeling experience, whereas Battlestar Galactica tried to have a whole prequel series that only went for like one season, then got canceled, and then is now kind of impossible to watch. Although in all fairness, Babylon 5 tried to have a sequel series and several sequel concepts, and none of those succeeded either. It probably is better to just have a one and done experience. Try and go 5 seasons if you can, and be done. But we're supposed to be talking about video game news. Apparently, Oscar Isaac wants a Metal Gear Solid movie. Director Jordan Vogt-Roberts is also reportedly working on the project. It is pretty much part of an actor's job. Oscar Isaac, not somebody that I could name any role he's been in, but I do recognize his name. But it is part of an actor and director's job to say we want things to happen, to try and make those deals do. There's just so much wrangling and backroom deals and negotiation happening to get any movie made that you have to enter these kinds of projects with a stupid, insane amount of positivity. As a gamer, I certainly need to ask the question, though, do I want to see a Metal Gear Solid movie? And it seems like Video Games Chronicle now is just going to constantly have ads, and my ad blocker may not be able to stop it. And yeah, it still does sound like Google Chrome is just going to straight up at the new year try and stop uBlock Origin. So these ad guard home Raspberry Pis I'm setting up really are coming at like the very perfect time, although I'm giving them away, so, and I don't know if the people that I'm giving them to, friends and family, even had ad block or had any kind of ad blocking at all. But yeah, I'm not sure that there is a great movie around the Metal Gear Solid series when you realize that a lot of the Metal Gear Solid series is already straight up stealing and parodying other movies. Like Solid Snake and all the Snake characters are straight up from Escape from New York, Escape from LA character. Just straight up stolen. Almost every character in the Metal Gear series has a name that is a joke or a parody around a movie character or a the name of a snake. Most of the bad guys are in one way or another visually depicted after one of the looks of David Bowie, and that's actually a lot that I just learned in the past couple of days as far as how the entire series really is just this parody series. So if you're going to try and make your own movie, the parody elements probably are not going to come over. So then you're going to have a stealth movie and an action movie, so it's going to be, I guess, kind of like a James Bond movie. There's probably just going to be a lot of fights and action sequences. At a certain point, that gets a competitor to James Bond movies, which is not a terrible thought. So I could see making an action movie with a spy-like character. I wouldn't be surprised if the themes of the reduction of nuclear proliferation and nuclear bombs are barely touched on or not mentioned at all, though. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of ignoring of the ridiculous stuff as far as Quiet breathing through her skin and wearing bikini tops, or one of the guys having a metal horn coming out of their heads, and the whole cloning aspect and all that. Like, it really is just a ton of potential things that you could immediately assume are going to be removed from anything called Metal Gear Solid. I think Metal Gear as a series, as a name, was also kind of around the idea of mechs. So, like, I assume, if I'm correct about that you would want to see some mechs, even though I don't think they really play that big of a role. At a certain level, it might be better to make a Metal Gear game as a cheap Japanese movie, live action movie, than it would be to make a Hollywood movie. But Hollywood obviously is out of ideas and is pitching everything, although Hollywood is also out of money, so that doesn't... I wouldn't be surprised if we see fewer and fewer movies made in general. And at a certain point, maybe that's where a lot of YouTube wannabe celebrities go, is that they start to make their own indie movies, and we see a resurgence of indie movie making. It's easier than ever to have a pretty great camera in an iPhone and record video and then chop it up and make an indie movie and potentially put it on YouTube. Can you sell it on YouTube? No. Not really, but if the art of making movies is going to survive, we almost need a generation willing to do that. But at a certain point, I guess that there's people that say the art of writing is dying, and that is why movies are dying, is that we really haven't had great collections of books. And I don't see a lot of people interested in writing new stories. Every story has already been told is the old cliche, but at a certain level it's true. So, but I don't know if we have as big of a generation as previous generations would have wanted to retell the same narrative, same stories over and over again. And when we see stories of people wanting to make movies based on video games, that does highlight that the movie writers, screenwriters, are out of ideas. And we're not quite to the point where I would say video game writing is getting worse or dying, but it's not particularly great either. Like there's a lot of games with no story. Marvel Snap is kind of a great example of that. That's a very simplistic short game, but sure would have made some sense to say that, say, Mojo or the Beyonder or somebody, just any character in the Marvel world where it would make sense, has created this game and put characters from the Marvel universe into it to find it. That's a whole part. There's a whole thing where everybody fights everybody in the Marvel universe a couple of times. So, yeah, that would have made a lot of sense. The Beyonder may not actually be a Marvel character, he may be a DC character, actually. I don't remember, but yeah. Any kind of story at all. All you really would have had to say is somebody has gotten the reality cosmic cube and used it to create the card game. Just a little animated intro to explain why the things are happening. Give it any kind of story at all. Something you'd see the first time you ran the game and never again. And Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Masters, same way, is there's absolutely no story around this at all. Where it would be nice if you could at least read a general synopsis of what happened in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime series. The fact that you can find plenty of videos doing synopsises of things like Yu-Gi-Oh! On YouTube by random fans, but you don't have anybody willing to do the same thing in your own product is kind of weird. Moving on with the Video Games Chronicles articles. Modern Warfare 2 has an Amsterdam level and it's compared to real life in a new video. I feel like both of these pictures here, though, are real-world pictures, but if I was to guess which one was fake, I would assume this is the fake one and this is the real-world one. Of course, I could be totally wrong about that, too. There's a shininess and level of reflections here, and a brightness without shadows on the walls here, whereas this is more in shadow and a little bit blurrier. So if it were a couple generations previous, I would have said this probably is the fake one, but we have hit a point where we are adding, or at least in this instance they're adding more detail than you'd really see in a random picture. And I suppose that church that burnt down, that Notre Dame, was it? I think that's the name of the church. The the big old one that burned down. I suppose that's just still getting repaired as it is, and I haven't heard anything about it since. And I know Ubisoft had digital versions of it, digital scans, but I don't think Ubisoft did anything with those digital scans. Where it would have probably made a lot of sense for, if Ubisoft did have digital scans of it, for them to have put out some kind of product and promoted that product every year on its anniversary of being burnt down or being damaged. It wasn't burnt down. Because that's one thing Ubisoft really could have gotten some good press on. Moving on, references to the Goonies were found in Multiverse's code. I feel like this was news that came out weeks and weeks ago, though. So I'm not by any means surprised by that. I will be almost certainly surprised if we see like this character or any of the kid characters in the Goonies. Yeah, I really don't know what character you could bring from the Goonies that would be reasonable, because I guess at a certain point kids are beating up on adults in Multiverses. You have Wonder Woman beating up on Jimmy Neutron, and that seems a little weird, but not that weird. But just regular human kids that were in the Goonies that don't have genius level gadgets or any kind of special powers is going to feel weird. Certainly. I said that by Monday we probably would have nothing more to say about this whole controversy. Like, as far as the small amount of feedback my tiny channel gets, I don't know where the general video gaming community falls down on this. I think more than likely that most people don't care about Bayonetta, so most people didn't care about this or even hear about this. The reactionary people on Reddit and the reactionary people on YouTube who often think of themselves as being friends to voice actors or being friendly with the video game development community, I think sided very quickly with Taylor, the old voice actress, without really holding their tongues, just to get a reaction video out there. Which, obviously, if you are just rushing to get a reaction video out there, you would have sided with her. She came out like at least a full day before anybody else said anything else as far as Platinum or leaks or the current English voice actor. But yeah, I imagine your average gamer, a lot of people never played Bayonetta or just don't care about Bayonetta, so they didn't care about this controversy, or they just don't care about voice actors. It's really hard for a lot of people to side with someone saying they were offered $4,000 to do a job when most people don't make $4,000 in a month. A lot of people barely make $4,000 in 2 months of working 80 hours a month plus. So, yeah, when you're comparing potentially 160 plus hours worth of pay at minimum wage in the United States to what was eventually proven to be a 5-hour session for $4,000, that's really hard to be to care about. That really is just first world problems, rich person's problems. There is that you only paid $4,000. Now, I know obviously a lot of people don't care or understand the idea that voice actors don't get work all the time, But in all fairness, a lot of people don't get work all the time. Either minimum wage workers often don't get work all the time. And there are people really struggling to have just enough money to feed themselves and their family. But yeah, there is definitely an argument that voice actors should be paid based on some level of skill that they allegedly have, which I'm not sure Taylor really had that much skill if they wanted to replace her. And some of that skill may be voice acting skill, and some of that may just be professionalism skill and getting along with other people's skills. And clearly Taylor no longer has that professionalism and getting along with people skill. And yeah, some of their pay should be higher because they have to audition and they just can't get work for every day of the week or every month of the year. But yeah, it's really, really hard to empathize with her when in her first announcement, even before any of the contradictions to her claims came out. Another topic and controversy I'd like to get feedback on, and my little channel is not going to really get a significant amount of feedback on, is just what is the state of online gaming these days? Because I'm constantly hearing of companies doing more and more to stop like the toxic chat or toxicity in games, or claiming there is toxicity in games. But then I'm also constantly hearing gamers saying they don't see it, or they don't care that they're seeing it. Like someone told me that they let their kid play online once, and then they were playing with kids, and even the kids were saying they were going to F their mother. And at a certain point, well, if let's say a 12-year-old is playing with other 12-year-olds and that's just the way 12-year-olds talk to each other, that's not acceptable, but it's normal. And I don't know what you do then other than admit that 12-year-olds are little edgelords and they say stuff to each other that their parents wouldn't like to hear. And as a person who was a 12-year-old edgelord at one time in their youth, I know for a fact I was saying a ridiculous amount of stuff amongst my friends and peers that my parents would have flipped out if they had heard. And that seems like that's really just a generational thing. I don't know if that really falls into a category of anything I'd call toxicity other than just normal playground talk or playground play. I suppose playground talk is the equivalent for kids to say something like locker room talk, but yeah, at a certain point, a 12-year-old edgelord is just going to have to be gently nudged to grow out of that, and that's just going to happen with every generation. Like, I really would only start to hold people accountable once they start to be 16, 17, 18-year-olds and they're still doing that, or if you're a 16, 17, 18-year-old or older and you're saying nasty things to what clearly is a 12-year-old online. But yeah, specifically games like Rocket League and Fortnite and things like that, is it really that way? I don't know. I don't play those games. I wouldn't play any of those games unmuted. I've already been through that experience, and so I know it's a better experience to either play single player, and usually it doesn't even have anything to do with toxicity. It's just I don't want to hear other people talking in general. Certainly when I was playing the Xbox 360 games and I would hear people chatting, they didn't say anything to me. Like, so my experience is fairly limited, but back when Xbox 360 was a big thing. So you're talking 7-8 years ago. I played a few things online. It was things like Uno and Apples to Apples, but I just didn't see it. So yeah, maybe I'm totally off on this, but I think a lot of people hear one thing once in 100 hours of gameplay sessions, and then they latch on to a preconceived notion that toxicity exists in a major way in video games more than it exists anywhere else in life. And I don't know if that preconceived notion is accurate. But yeah, so if anybody could give me a general idea as far as feedback, like particularly now, I would say anybody that's streaming can't really get away with saying anything, and everybody at a certain level knows that they could be recorded or be broadcast online, so they're going to either say something or not, knowing that they could be caught on camera. And that's just in the real life, is that cameras are just everywhere, let alone on video games. Games like Modern Warfare 2 and Overwatch 2 are straight up recording and doing text-to-speech of everything you're saying, and there has been a lot more complaint around the idea that you could be amongst a group of your friends saying things that you find all acceptable amongst your group of friends, and that you would still get kicked out or banned from playing the game because you said something that Overwatch 2 Activision Blizzard decided was not acceptable. In general, this is why I kind of prefer the Japanese language, in that there really is only one bad word in the Japanese language, and it's just how you say things otherwise. So a edgelord 10-year-old Japanese person can say baka, idiot, and as long as they don't say it really nastily, that nobody's really going to care. Of course, that probably in part leads to the Japanese way of talking, in which everybody apologizes for everything and everybody is overly enthusiastic and nice to each other and apologetic to each other, which is not realistic, but the fear of insulting someone is very high. But as far as this Bayonetta thing, because I don't want to get into big of a role here, Bayonetta actor, this is Video Game Chronicles, confirmed she was offered more than was first implied. I think implied here, if I can editorialize, should be in quotation marks, because it was straight up said. Taylor confirms that there was a 15,000 figure and claims that, quote, powerful journalists, which the last time there was a powerful journalist was probably Deep Throat in the Watergate scandal. Like, journalists being powerful is not something I believe in. Like, if there was any real power to journalism these days, then more people would be buying newspapers and TV stations to try and influence things, and that just hasn't succeeded in the past decade or so. Like the Jeff Bezos buying, I believe it's Bloomberg, didn't get him anywhere as much influence as I imagine he wanted to get from it. The guy who owns CNN, I think, probably tries to push a lot of narrative, but it doesn't really succeed, and has led to the eventual collapse of credibility, or at least a significant lowering of credibility as far as CNN. The guy who owns Fox News, same story. Owning Facebook and Twitter and things like that would be the direction to go if there was going to be a way of influencing the way people think and understand situations, because it's way better to have an algorithm that just calls hundreds of different types of posts fake news than it is to have a single Walter Cronkite type journalist out there trying to promote a propaganda piece. So yeah, I would completely reject the idea of powerful journalists. I mean, I guess relatively speaking, you could say that Jason Schreier is probably the most journalist-like journalist in video game journalism, so he may have a little bit more credibility, but I don't think he really has any power. And I don't know any other journalist, the Video Game Chronicles journalist, who had independent sources that also confirmed that Taylor was being inaccurate in her description of the situation. They don't have really any power. Nor, if you follow the money, does it really benefit journalists to counteract a narrative that would sell way better if they sided with Taylor. And see, we're just at the sub-headline here, but yeah. She's confirming a $15,000 figure, which it wasn't $15,000. It would have been $15,000 to $20,000 as an offer. This was a SAG-AFTRA union rule package of $15,000 too, so the union's staying incredibly silent here because they don't want to back her either. Earlier this month, she called the suggestion that she was offered more than $4,000 categorically untrue. She broke NDA to say she was only offered $4,000. Then she came back and said, "No, you're wrong," when they got from other sources, from leaks, the offer of $15,000 to $20,000. She claims the sources could have earned $15,000, quote, "an absolute lie and a complete joke." So, yeah. On the Monday, we have a thing is, come to my attention that some people are calling me a liar and a gold digger. We'll ignore gold digger. Definitely a lie. And I feel need to defend myself and my reputation in the industry. So now she says, as I posted on the part of 3 of my video thread, I explained that, so part 3 of your video thread, I explained the first offer was too low. The offer was $10,000 total. Remember, this is a $450 million franchise, not counting merchandise. That still doesn't mean anything. I then wrote in Japanese to Hideki Kamiya asking what I was worth. So, yeah. She probably insulted the Japanese by not going through the process anyways. And that may have been where she screwed up, is directly contacting the boss. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But in the Japanese situation, by jumping over other people, I was then offered an extra $5,000, so I declined to voice the game. And I'll put on my tinfoil hat conspiracy as to what was really going on here in a second, but she was later offered a flat fee to voice some lines for $4,000. Bloomberg claiming that was for a cameo role. All other lies, such as $4,000 for 5 sessions, are total fabrications, she stated. There were not extensive negotiations. I've also been informed of ridiculous fictions, such as I asked for $250,000. I am a team player. I'm just asking for a fair living wage in line with the value I bring to the game. I was paid a shockingly low total of $3,000. Now here's the problem that we get to this, is that we can believe her all or not believe her. And it really is just going to come down to her credibility. Unfortunately, at the beginning of the statement, she's straight up admitting that she was not being 100% honest with her first statements, and she's caused confusion. So why should I believe the next thing she says? Like, if you can't come up with accurate information the first time, why would I believe you came up with accurate information the second time? And I'm being incredibly generous by calling it accurate information instead of just saying what most people would say is that if you lied the first time, you're probably going to be lying the second time. She has absolutely wrecked her credibility, and this is the risk you take, certainly, breaking NDAs and bringing drama to the world, is that even if you're 100% in the right, unless you got the receipts, half of the people are going to not believe you. And even if you do have receipts, still probably a quarter of people are not going to believe you. So, and yes, this is blaming potentially the victim, certainly as far as people making accusations, but it's a certain point too, is that there's just a percentage of people that will never believe you, and you really got to get all your ducks in a row and do this in court and sue them if there's a lawsuit to happen. Whereas there was no lawsuit to really happen, so they now the only lawsuit that possibly is going to happen is that Taylor is going to be sued for tortious interference or breaking an NDA or slander or libel. Very possibly both. And she continuously puts out exact numbers that can be proven wrong. If they offered her $15,001 or $15,001 even, then that could be proven in a court case that she once again is slandering and libeling them with false information. But there's even another problem in what she's about to say, if I can make it far enough in this game to talk about it. Let's see. Let's just do this. I know I need to link summon things, but it's just too slow. The second part she says here is, I was paid a shockingly low total of $3,000 total for the 3,000 pounds for the first game. So 3,000 pounds actually at that time may have been closer to $6,000. Maybe even a little bit more than that. Which at a certain point, though, doesn't that then confirm her worth a little bit? And that she actually was getting paid what she felt like was a reasonable amount for the first game, because she came back for the second game and she probably got paid well. A little more for the second, it says. So once again, doesn't that just confirm what she thought was acceptable? She didn't walk away until the third one. There is a potential here saying that she may be too connected to the role. I wanted to voice her. I drummed up interest in this game ever since I started on Twitter in 2011. That's kind of just the free work that people have to do as voice actors, and it's a sucky system certainly, but it's not out of the norm that voice actors have to promote themselves, and to promote themselves they have to promote the projects they worked on. You do see occasionally that actors will just not take interviews or do any press about movies that they're in because they weren't paid enough or they don't believe in it. And this once again just collaborates, and Video Games Chronicles is pointing us out what VGC themselves said, that she was paid significantly less than $15,000 offered to her for the third game. Then, let's see, they skipped down on Monday. Taylor concluded her series of messages by claiming she had kept up interest in the game, which I don't believe for a second. Really, I've never even heard of her until this controversy. I couldn't tell you who the English voice actress of Bayonetta is. And I think I'll be perfectly happy with the other voice actress, unless she just sounds very, very different, which I doubt she does. And even if she did sound very different, there's always the possibility of switching over to the Japanese voice actress, which would sound, I imagine, way better anyways. There's definitely a point where if you are going to make accusations, the best thing you can do is to say, I said what I said and I stand by it. Or maybe you say that in a more elegant way, but yeah, I stand by my previous statements as being 100% true and factually accurate. Anything countering that is I have no comment on anyone attempting to counter my previous statements. Might be something. Although maybe you just don't have that second sentence at all. Just, I stand by what I said previously, and ask people to stand by and support me by boycotting the game, if that's still what you're even trying to push. Although the talk of the boycott seems to have mostly been ignored at this point. At least by Video Game Journalists, or VGC here. She concluded, there are people who are attempting to throw shade and discredit what I say. The industry is powerful and they have powerful journalists too, which I kind of almost agree with that journalists often are not independent enough in video game. So I just don't think the video game industry, as far as Platinum Games, is that powerful. So unless you're telling me that Nintendo has thrown up some cash to bribe Jason Schreier to potentially ruin his credibility, which he's worked really hard to build up, to discredit it. They are trying to save their asset. Don't fall for it. Yeah. Inherently, this is a great example of the problem of having products promoted and put on sale with affiliate links when you're talking about a product that potentially some people might consider boycotting, or that you might be talking about in a negative light, depending on how people might take these allegations. Now, to put on my tinfoil hat theory, as far as what's going on, I think Taylor is going through a major Karen moment. To be ungenerous, to be generous, I would call it a psychotic breakdown of some sort, that she considered her worth way higher than what anybody else considered it, and as such, she is now surprised. She was surprised when they decided to not come back groveling and asking her on bended knee to come and play and be the voice actress and pay her residuals, which, yeah, or ridiculous amounts of money. Even her response is still not in line with what we've heard from other leaks and sources. Platinum Games has done this perfectly by not saying anything directly that could lead to a lawsuit against them, and just trying to generally not respond to a disgruntled employee. But the leaks have definitely shown that if we believe the leaks, the end of the negotiation happened when she came back with a counteroffer for a six-figure sum, which we don't know what that six-figure sum is, and residuals. She doesn't mention six-figure sum and residuals counteroffer at all. She says they came back and they offered her, even in this story, which is a different story than what she was saying before. But yeah, she was saying that they just offered her $15,000. She's still picking the smallest possible number, just doubling down on the same bad concept of lying, frankly, by picking the smallest number you can cherry pick and hoping that nobody investigates any further when it's fairly obvious now. It's not like the video game journalism industry does this a lot to people anyways. In fact, this is probably the first time the video game journalists, mainstream video game journalists have held anybody's feet to the fire as far as verifying their claims. A better Ubisoft, a better Activision Blizzard, all of those accusations around Ubisoft and Activision Blizzard that have been going on for 2 years, nobody's really been able to do any real investigative journalism there to independently confirm anything claimed there, and nobody's really even tried. They've just taken the claims by the workers as 100% right and not tried to verify any of it. So what we're seeing here, even though it may lead to a controversy and having to side with a big corporation, or in this case a kind of medium-sized corporation than Platinum Games. What we're seeing is the growing up of mainstream video game journalists, and actively people trying to get the full story and all sides of the story, which is a thing that journalism in general used to do, and now it has unfortunately often become, I want to do my propaganda piece that has one angle for the story and one narrative for the story, and I don't want to even bother to find any evidence that would counter that. But yeah, I think she's having a major flip out moment. Maybe not really to the level of an actual mental breakdown, because she's rejected. The girl got dumped professionally, and now she's doing everything in her possible to hurt the boyfriend. In this case, the boyfriend being Platinum Games and the girl being Taylor. It is very possible that writing Hideki Kamiya sealed her fate. But yeah, I also wouldn't be surprised if it is very much a Japanese thing, where the Japanese are just used to people not negotiating at all and just taking whatever they're offered. I really do wonder if the much better accredited Japanese voice actress of Bayonetta wasn't offered, say, $15,000 or less to do the same job. But at this point, I don't know if there's anything more that I could go with this. Like, obviously if there's more information that comes out, you have to kind of cover it, but people get set into their first impressions, whatever their first impressions are, and I'm not 100% immune from that. So I think Taylor was being greedy, and I can't fully be upset about Taylor being greedy, but I think she got caught being greedy and now has no way out to save face. And frankly, I think it really came down on her when there was claims and evidence being claimed to have been seen to say that she was being dishonest, and at this point she, in her second response, has kind of confirmed that she was being dishonest. I wouldn't be surprised of the people who cared and wanted to support her if there isn't a greater backlash of and feelings of betrayal now, and that may lead to more people being upset with Taylor than would have been originally. I feel like Taylor also was definitely trying to lean on the idea of believe all victim claims, or believe the little person in every claim, and was just hoping that nobody would have seen it. Inherently, if her claims had not blown up on places like Reddit and it hadn't gotten 10 million views, which I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see her trying to monetize that channel and ask for her subscribers, and that this just tries to pivot to, hey, donate to a Patreon, help me out. Like, certainly these kinds of things can lead to a rabid fandom that just want to support somebody just because their political allegiances somewhat line up. I think plenty of people that were supporting, like, Vic Mignogna, really were just anti-Canada cancel culture people and had never even heard of Vic Mignogna. And I don't know if that particularly worked out for those people, because that lawsuit is still, I think, pending appeal as far as the whole Vic Mignogna slander lawsuit. It did not get resolved quickly by any means. Ideally, personally, I'd just like this story to go away, because it is just negativity, and it is just going to boil down into more negativity. It could lead to positivity in some ways if voice actors start talking about what they get paid for specific jobs and start breaking NDAs amongst other voice actors, but honestly amongst the real world people. Like, a good video game journalist would probably have, and I just don't know if there are any good video game journalists out there, they probably would have had the idea to say, hey, you know what, let me just send out a blast email to every voice actor I can contact and say, hey, I don't want you to break your NDA in a way that you could get in trouble, but I want you to break your NDA and tell me how much you got paid for games. A blind sampling, as it were, of AAA voice actors as far as what they got paid on average, just so we can establish what the right amount is, because even before there was any claims of Taylor being inaccurate, nobody outside of video game voice acting knows what a reasonable amount was supposed to be. Yeah, and I guess if I had enough contacts and was a real video game journalist, that's something I could send a blast email out myself if I had the contacts. But if I was to do it, I'd almost have to certainly direct message every video game voice actor that I could find on Twitter to get just like no response back from 99.9% of them. Moving on, Video Games Chronicles says, it looks like Uncharted is Sony's weakest PC launch so far. The Legacy Collection peak number of players failed to match previous first-party ports. That's not super surprising, though, when you consider what the Legacy Collection was. It was a combination of a Uncharted game with the male characters that people actually had grown to know and love, but it was the third game in the series without the first two games being on PC. And then the side game with the female characters. So that's it's not super surprising that didn't really sell. I never personally had any enthusiasm for it. Whenever these numbers were brought up, though, you can see that 4,000 people were playing it right now, and 10,000 were at a 24-hour peak, and this must have probably been right when it was released. The all-time peak, though, is only 10,851, so yeah. The other games, though, definitely have a lot more buzz and enthusiasm around it. I think I probably should stop playing at this point. I think it's approaching the point where I'm going to have to give up on trying to get to Platinum and just go back to playing regular ranked, which who knows what that experience will be like now. guess add that to the hand, but then it's just gonna return it to the deck. Unless this guy just decides to concede. But yeah, God of War being people way more excited about that, no surprise. Spider-Man, people being more excited about that, no surprise. Although, the fact that Marvel Snap has really not been talked about, and then Spider-Man was really popular, I think highlights how a AAA game with a Marvel title on it has a lot more pull than a mobile game with a Marvel labeling, Marvel characters. Also, maybe it's just better to have a game that is a AAA game focused around one character than Marvel Snap having all the Marvel characters and not focusing on any of it. Horizon Zero Dawn, obviously popular there. Days Gone is actually the shocking one here, in that was a pretty bad game, and still it has more of a peak experience to it. I wouldn't be surprised if these numbers change and eventually Uncharted beats Days Gone in the long run, but I wouldn't be surprised if it never goes any higher than that. Uncharted would really jump perhaps even past Horizon Zero Dawn to the third spot if they just brought out Uncharted 1 and 2 to PC. But there's been no talk of that. It may be a porting issue and an engine issue. Even at that, Uncharted 1 and 2 may not actually be as good of games as people might think. But yeah, as a Steam PC gamer, I'm not going to bother to buy Uncharted until I can play the first two Uncharted games. Like, it just doesn't make sense. I've got plenty of other games I can play. I've got the third in the Tomb Raider reboot series to play, and Uncharted is just a Tomb Raider ripoff anyways. Let's see. Sniper Ghost Warriors Studio confirms plans for a live service shooter. CI Games will also release a survival game alongside its Lords of Fallen reboot. I guess check out this Video Games Chronicle article if you're interested. God of War Ragnarok spoilers are appearing online ahead of next month's release. At this point, it seems like every AAA game is going to get a headline where in the headline they're going to say spoilers are appearing online, and really they only need one person speculatively spoiling the game for that to be an accurate statement. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is now just a standard thing that mainstream video game journalists is going to do, is just say spoilers are appearing online. Maybe spoilers will become the next boogeyman, like toxicity is often the boogeyman in video games now. But who knows? It may just be a way to write more articles. This is a little interesting for me. Like, I may be rewarded for not getting around to playing Fallout 4, in that a Fallout 4 is now getting a free upgrade, performance mode for higher frame rates for the PS5, Xbox Series S and X, and PC. See, and they get away with saying PS5 because the PS5 and the PS5 Slim mean the same thing in people's minds, where the Xbox Series X and S have different labels in people's minds. I still don't think Fallout 4 could be that big of a difference. Really? Let's see. Let's hope that the upcoming update will make it possible to play the game with both resolution and frame rate enhanced rather than one or the other. Also announced was a 25th anniversary bundle for Fallout 76, including a Vault Boy portrait, a shooting target suite, Lincoln's repeater lever action skin. Yeah, I don't recall what happened at the last Bethesda con. I don't know if they just canceled the last one, or if it's just about to happen, or it just happened and I didn't hear anything from it. I think there's a Bethesda con. But noticeably, the only thing we've really gotten out of Bethesda lately has been more around Starlink, which that makes a lot of sense. So, let's see. I would need 4 more link summons, which could just be 1 more game. Probably need 2 more games to get to Platinum. But I am leaning towards being done with playing the regulation deck and just going back to ranked at that point. Don't bother to try to get to Diamond. I'll just click claim all here instead of claiming them all slowly. I mean, there still is time. We have 3 days, so if I just played later today and tomorrow and the next day, there is that possibility that you could get up. I don't think you could get up to Platinum 1 though. Like, once you hit the Platinum stats, you're pretty much stuck at that point. And I would like to see it start to become a case where the giveaways on these are not exclusive things you can't get anywhere else, and instead are just random rewards that you could also buy in the shop if you missed. I'd prefer that in all cases with the game. Yeah, to get a blue protector sleeve, which is actually a very boring looking protector sleeve compared to the ones being purchased, you would have to just get up to that, which potentially the blue protector could come back later on in another giveaway. Moving on, Video Games Chronicles says Apex Legends' 5th new map, Broken Moon, introduces zip rails and a bigger point of interest next week. Check that out if you're interested in Apex Legends. And then our last Video Games Chronicle article for today says November's free games with Amazon Prime have leaked. Fallout New Vegas and World Rally Championship 9 are among the 7 titles listed. Last day of June, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. That's an old game. Etherborn, Whisper of Willows, and Facility 47. Yeah, as far as Fallout New Vegas Ultimate Edition, that's pretty much the only game that jumps out as being great. Yeah, and the whole Fallout New Vegas stuff is just something that Bethesda really doesn't promote much, because it's just something Bethesda really didn't make. Going through the Gematsu articles, and remember now, we're going to have considerably fewer, or maybe half as many games on Steam to look at, so we'll burn through that fairly fast. But the Gematsu article says Tactic Ogre Reborn opening gameplay hour if you want to check that out. Here we have an interview with Suda51 as far as new platforms, creating the series finale, ports, and more. He's the No More Heroes guy. It's a video interview with a transcript, so he's probably speaking in Japanese if you want to check that out. I haven't seen anybody quote mine this transcript though, so I doubt that he says anything particularly that interesting. Also, when you recognize that this actually came out on the 21st, there's been 3 days or so to quote mine it. He said some, I'm sure he says a few interesting things, but it really just boils down to, hey, is he actually announcing any ports? Is he announcing any new games? Is he announcing anything that yeah, anything of interest? Like, he does make an interesting comparison here where he says Hideki Kojima said that he was done with Metal Gear Solid like 2 times, but we still got more. So he's making that comparison, Goichi Suda51 Suda, in that he's implied that he's done with No More Heroes, but they still got more. The best news you can possibly, I think, take from this interview in general is just that he is not announcing some weird spin-off No More Heroes game that nobody liked. Also, let me just point something out that maybe people missed. This is a t-shirt for the Hellfire Club in Stranger Things Season 3, I believe. So there's probably in plain sight a hint here that he is either a huge fan of Stranger Things Season 3 or he is secretly working on a Stranger Things game. And that's an interesting thought, certainly, as to what kind of game you would make for Stranger Things Season 3 or Stranger Things in general. And I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't bother to ask about it or they didn't get any response about it. It's also possible, though, Netflix gave t-shirts to a bunch of people, but even Netflix sending t-shirts to Suda51 is very weird. This is the more intriguing thought than anything else. So yeah, take it down today on October 24th. If in a month or two we get an announcement that Suda51 is working on a Stranger Things game, we should have all seen it coming. Moving on, Akai Katana Shin adds a PC version, which I don't know what kind of game this is. I would assume it's a shoot 'em up. Yeah, it's a shoot 'em up, and we're not going to try and watch trailers too much. City Connection and Granzella announce a game called Project Formation Z for PS4 and more. Based, I guess, in the Jellicoe universe, whatever the Jellicoe universe is. Let's see if this announcement trailer, blurred as it is, might tell me something. Looks like an old Atari game with Transformers. Kind of like the Robotech Transformers, but see, when the Robotech was the merging of 3 completely unrelated anime, and one of them was called Robotech, the second one. The beginning, I think, was Macros. And then the third one, I don't even know the name of. So, fighter plane converting into mecha, I think, is more Macros related. But I have never heard the Jellicoe universe. I don't know if that's particularly a great concept for a game. It's a gimmick for old games of a later day, but if you like flying around and doing a side-scrolling shoot 'em up, you may very well not like playing as a mech on the ground doing a ground-based shoot 'em up bullet hell type experience, or vice versa. So you're limiting your audience to people that just have the overlap of liking both of those types of gameplay mechanics, and you're already in the niche of shoot 'em ups. Anyways, One Piece Odyssey has an Alabaster gameplay trailer if you want to check that out. Honestly, for games particularly like this, like One Piece, where there have just been so many other failures of One Piece games, no amount of trailers or advertisements are good enough. You just have to wait till the game comes out and get some reviews before you can even begin to consider playing that game. They've just lost too much credibility. One Period has a teaser trailer for, I guess, a character Rumi Nanasi, another heroine featured. And this is really just a trailer for what very possibly is just a bunch of anime girls in a what I assume is a visual novel of some sort. And seeing a lot of pink and a lot of cutesy stuff, which makes me wonder if this is just a pink and cutesy thing story, or if there's some bloody twist to it that turns it into a horror later. Trailer doesn't seem to indicate any of that. I'm still getting the pop-up. I thought I had fixed that, but I don't know. I do see that Firefox wants me to reset and update, so this will be the first time that I reset it and update, and hopefully I won't lose all my tabs. I shouldn't. And this will be the first time to see if major things change as far as a browser update. Really, major things shouldn't change. Everything should look the same and feel the same. Let's see. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure All-Star Battle R DLC character launches October 28th. Risotto Nero. Check that out if you're interested. Genshin Impact version 3.2 update. Akasha Pulses, the Kalpa Flame Rises, launches November 2nd. Genshin Impact still, I think, needs to be applauded for being a game that is still very much being supported, still getting new content. If they have managed to maintain even 30 to 20% of their initial launch player base, they're probably doing particularly great as a game. But while they did raise the bar as far as visuals, I'm not sure they really raised the bar as far as gameplay mechanics or giving enough credibility to mobile games to make people want to become mobile gamers, which no one game is probably going to be able to pull that off. It's just going to have to be a slow push over the course of 4 or 5 years of just seeing better and better mobile games and fewer bad mobile games. Moving on, Square Enix trademarks Symbiogenesis in Japan, and Bandai trademarks Dream Match. Again, these trademarks don't really mean much. This week's Japanese game releases: Bayonetta 3 and Star Ocean: The Divine Force and more. Let's see. It is fairly redundant to have Gematsu articles talk about the games that are releasing in Japan. Kind of long list here. Again, possibly because of Golden Week slowing things down for the past couple of weeks. But yeah, until you start seeing the Famitsu reviews, Famitsu being an unaffiliated magazine that reviews video games to Gematsu, although they might have the same parent company. That would be surprising if they did, though. I don't think Famitsu has a English website. If they did, I probably should just be following Famitsu directly. Regardless, Famitsu does have a certain level of credibility as far as their review scores of games in Japan, and it'll be interested to see what the scores of Bayonetta 3 in particular are. I doubt the Japanese in Famitsu in particular would make any kind of special adjustment. So ideally, I'd like to see Bayonetta 3 get a 39 out of 40, 40 out of 40. If it gets a 32 to 30 out of 40, that's still pretty great. Anything lower than that signals a major red flag and a major problem. It would be interesting, I suppose, to bring up what the two previous games got as far as Famitsu scores. Let's see. Moving on, Gmode archives Megami Tensei Gaiden, Shinyaku Last Bible 3, Mugen no EU has been announced for Switch. That is quite the mouthful. These Gmode games are old cell phone games that they are porting. And this very much may be part of the Shin Megami Tensei series, or it may not. Even if it was, it's going to be a spin-off of the series and not mainline enough to really matter, I think, to most people. PlayStation Partner Awards 2022, Japan, Asia has been set for December 2nd. Is that really what it's labeled as? Just Japan, space Asia? User Choice Awards voting are now open. I assume to just Japanese and Asian people. Yeah, Japan/Asia is really what it should be. Not just Japan space Asia, but even at that, the idea that Japan is not part of Asia is kind of ridiculous, so why not just say Asia? Or why not just say Japan and admit that it's solely focused on Japan? Voting is available in Hong Kong, Indonesia, Japan, Malaysia, Thailand, and Singapore. So, yeah, all Asian countries. Noticeably missing is China or Taiwan. India is not involved here. Korea is surprisingly missing. Maybe that's just because Koreans are angry at Japanese people or vice versa. Yeah. There's a lot of Asian countries not being included in this list. And inherently that, I think, points as a Westerner just to how much the Asian countries have their own histories and are all fighting against each other and not happy. There's a reason why they aren't one big mega country merged together. They're different people with different ways of thinking, different cultures, different societies. And arguably China, which is the biggest mega country in the world, really has probably about 12 other countries inside of it that are just being held together by sheer force of will of the Communist Party. Yeah. Moving on, Magical Drop 6 adds a PC version. I could see going through a series of these games. I don't know what I could really say about these games. In a lot of ways, these would be kind of the games where I would just spotlight them. There is, I suppose, a possibility that I could play a simplistic game like this where you're not really doing too much as live streams as the same time as I'm covering video game news. But that would be a lot of setup to switch between games constantly. Really, that is the smarter move with my channel, is if I just kind of abandoned anything that was permanent and stopped playing like Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, and then just every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday there was some long live stream that happened of some game, and then that live stream led to getting more games played and maybe not making as much pre-recorded footage, or that would let me burn through games faster, certainly, but it would be a lot of setup. And at a certain point, I feel like if I was going to do that kind of setup, I probably didn't need a completely separate news section and a completely separate part of the stream to be the news section, instead of bouncing back and forth, much like a TV show or TV channel, where you might have some random show and then you have news at 10 or news at 9, and then you have a completely different show. But yeah, all of that I think takes more setup than I can do. Moving on, Gamatsu says Cult of the Lamb Blood Moon Festival limited time event is set for October 24th through November 10th. Okay, so I'm gonna miss that because I don't even own that game. A game called Infernax has a Halloween update that adds a new playable character called the Stranger, which you might say he looks a little bit like Jason in the hockey mask, but if anything, with the electrified shotgun, he's kind of like the mix of the Ash from the Evil Dead series with a hockey mask from, what's that guy's name? Casey Kasem in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series. Yeah. The actual game, though, looking at the screenshots here, is so zoomed out. Them adding a new character probably doesn't really do much. Yep. But it's an interesting Halloween update. We don't see a lot of Halloween updates for as much as you would think you would see them for video games. Halloween's just really not a big enough holiday. And it's not a holiday that really leads towards selling video games anyway, so it has that problem of not being commercialized enough for people to care about it. Sword and Fairy Together Forever is coming to Xbox Series, Xbox One on November 3rd. The PC version will also be available via the Microsoft Store, I guess exclusively, which is interesting because it's already on Steam. And yeah, 71% over its lifetime, 64% in the last 30 days, so people are not super happy with it as a Chinese game. And I would say Sword and Fairy 7 is probably the most AAA game of Chinese games I've seen so far, and it's still just not quite there. It's at least a generation behind in gameplay concepts and visuals. It's very possible that it's a generation behind in visuals and 2 to 5 generations behind in actual gameplay concepts. I still haven't adjusted what happens when I don't have the plugin enabled when I click on a link, so it's opening a completely new window, which that's not what I want to happen. Fallout 4 is coming to the PS5 and Xbox Series in 2023, which I thought it already was out on those. Well, I guess it's backwards compatible, probably. Like, I would seriously doubt that you cannot play Fallout 4 backwards compatible on the PS5 and Xbox Series. But the way Gamatsu is phrasing it, this would be the first release for a version that specifically targets the hardware of the PS5 and the Xbox Series. Alright, so that brings us to our games that came out on Steam. And you will notice all of them have a release date. What I was able to do was, on the long list of recently released games, I was able to capture the information that it will be at that point where the date would have been, and just save it as a variable and then test it to see if it says coming soon. Since they are consistent, or at least fairly consistent, with the coming soon phrase on that page, that allowed me to then just skip that link and move to the next link down if it does say coming soon. And I expect it to eliminate potentially at least 30% of all the games. It's also going to potentially stop repetitive announcements like this game, because this was announced and didn't have a release date, and now it does, and so now I feel justified in giving it a follow, even though it may not be particularly that good. Now, what this new programming doesn't do is it doesn't stop asset flip horror games, it doesn't stop garbage games, it doesn't really change the fact that we are going to mostly ignore and not talk about a lot of these games. Like this Girl Slap, is this an adult game? It kind of implies that it might be, but it's just 3D models of anime-like girls. And it doesn't have any mature content warnings in it at all. So, I guess the idea of Girl Slap would be that it would just be a slap fight, which I think that's kind of a big misnomer anyways, because almost all girl fights I've ever seen are incredibly brutal, and they really are fighting. And something I've got here is blocking this from actually playing, because I kind of would like this to play and be able to see how the fight really goes down, but yeah. This obviously isn't just slapping if you're kicking someone in the face. Otherwise, though, I don't think that there's enough visual polish to believe that this would be an actual fighting game worth mentioning or worth playing. There's a couple other games already around the idea of cute girls fighting each other. I'm still waiting for them to potentially make a new Rumble Roses wrestling game, or a port of Rumble Roses XX. Part of the problem with the Rumble Roses series, though, I think, is that I came into the Rumble Roses XX on the 360 having never played a wrestling game, so my expectations were very low on that game, and I honestly didn't really play it that much. Let's see, a walking simulator adventure in a randomized world where every step counts. Weird description, which is going to cause me to say no to this game. Yeah, had I actually been a fan of wrestling games, then I probably would have hated Rumble Roses XX. And that probably is the problem. And at this point, fans of wrestling games are just kind of forced to playing the EA most recent wrestling game, and there really aren't any other options. So we could certainly we could be in line for a resurgence of counterculture, counter WWE, WWF wrestling games, but they have to actually be programmed well, and that's the difficulty. Like there really isn't, I think, a lot of code in Unreal Engine 5 around wrestling and grappling people and coming in direct contact and doing different kinds of wrestling moves. We don't even, I can't even really name a game that would have like a power attack of some sort where you would just do like one wrestling type move on an enemy, or even just punch enemies. This Phobos project looks like it might be interesting. Should I do a YouTube short on this though? I think no. Yeah, in fact, No More Heroes 3, I guess, would be the only game of late that would have wrestling moves in it. And that's just extra animations. I did hear about this game that's being promoted by a erotic cosplayer on Twitter that I follow, called Wildlife, W-Y-L-D Life. I'll see if I can show it. That does seem like it's kind of in this Kickstarter state where they're trying to get a lot of backers, and I don't know if you really should support it, but it's trying to be kind of like a Second Life, but more focused on day one admitting that it's just going to be used for like fantasy role playing, sexual fantasy role playing. Golden Light of the Rose. This is a weird enough game that I'll give it a follow and a short. But it is also a game that very possibly is not coming to Steam. Togum. This might be an asset flip adventure game, but there might be something well enough to this. This is definitely another one that seems like it deserves to be on the follow list. You might find this to be like a Brazilian Portuguese game creator, and so they're trying to make a real game, but they're having to asset flip a little bit also. Although some of the assets they flip there do feel like they are the same assets I may have seen in some other adult games. Kanji RPG. It's not visually polished enough. Say yes to that. Fig. I don't think it's visually polished enough either. I liked it as zoomed in, but that's about the only thing I can say I like about it is it's slightly more zoomed in. And what's the point of being zoomed in when you have fairly bland characters to look at? Fading Light Anti-World is a VR game. Do we do YouTube shorts on horror VR games? I don't think so. I don't think I want that confusion. We have so many YouTube shorts already anyways. So yeah, my point that I was trying to make around, I'll give this a follow but not make a short on it, Wildlife, is that it is very possible that I don't have the right sources for adult games, and that there are adult games being kickstarted and made and released, and they're just being all released on other websites or their own personal websites, storefronts. And at a certain level, it kind of doesn't even matter, because Steam has just such a massive control of the market share that if an adult game isn't on Steam, it might as well not exist. That's what I've said about non-adult games. It's just as true for adult games. In the same way that if Walmart's not selling your product, your you're probably selling considerably fewer and not really that relevant of a product seller and product maker. And even in that comparison to Walmart, Walmart has actually quite a few competitors. Target and grocery stores and Amazon, whereas Steam really doesn't have any competitors anywhere close. This party maker, I think, is probably just either this is a decorating game, maybe even a mobile port of a decorating game, and kind of just an asset flip where you pick up items and place them, or it's a decorating game and a cleaning game, which even at that I still don't think that works. Does this even deserve a follow? I'll be generous and give it a follow. This one's already mixed reviewed. Idle Monster Frontier. There's nothing here that would interest me. Another 12 Labors of Hercules resource management game. But we're almost done already. Settlement Survival doesn't look like anything. I'm starting to get really hungry too. Endoparasitic might be something interesting. Just a torso crawling all over the place, dragging itself. I guess I probably shouldn't do a YouTube short around that though, because that's just a little too gory and bloody. Deadly Harvest, top-down twin stick shooter game. And see, this is the problem with this is this isn't really a game that would interest me enough, and I couldn't get this YouTube short out really in time for Halloween. Anyways, I could make this short and just go out of my way to present it, but and see, this video plays fine, so I don't know what the problem with the other video was. And then our last game today is Boo Party, which is our only adult game for today. Let's see. It's mature content description is at the top. It says as revealing outfits, sexual flirtatious comments, nudity, breasts and butts, alcohol and tobacco use. Nudity can be disabled with in-game controls. All characters over 18. So yeah, at a certain level, that is what I would want. Of course, the problem here is even in like recent events and announcements, then you have some spicy pictures and advertisements. Let me see if the actual screenshots are YouTube family friendly, and I think they are. So like this is kind of exactly what you would want for an adult game that you could show on Steam, on YouTube, and still stay within the realm of family friendly. Just a little bit of skin, a little bit of cleavage, toggling the actual nudity off for streamer mode. Ideally, that's exactly what you would want for all adult games. There's a mini game here where she's crushing pumpkins while exercising. And in a funny way, I guess this is supposed to be like Egon, or a reference to Ghostbusters. Yeah. And yeah, I guess for my personal taste, as far as what I could actually cover and what I'd actually want to see, is a game first with some titillation second, whereas most adult games are titillation first and then no game to be seen ever anywhere. That was the last game for Steam, and I put it on the follow list, but I think it is worth mentioning that there are some people claiming to have used stabilized diffusion or other softwares like that, artificial intelligence, to make art, and that we potentially are going to start seeing slide puzzles in adult games that are just 100% whole cloth created by artificial intelligence, so they don't have to license the pictures. I think a lot of those games that got on Steam with slide puzzles were straight up stealing the art in the first place, and the art won't be as good. Stabilized diffusion also notably seems incapable of understanding the gravity physics of spaghetti, thinking it's a rigid thing that would just be like an uncooked stick of spaghetti instead of a string of spaghetti after being cooked, which is just another example of how artificial intelligence doesn't really understand reality. But on top of the beginning of a craze for artificial art that actually exists, there is people jumping on that craze using the phrase novel AI or similar phrases to claim that the thing they're selling was made by artificial intelligence, and there is definitely questions as to whether that's really true or whether people are just hand creating things like they used to and just claiming that an artificial intelligence did it, which is a sad statement to be an artist so unknown and unappreciated that you can sell your art better by claiming a computer did it than you personally having done it. And of course, you can't claim copyright on something that was created by an artificial intelligence, so you're effectively lying or losing copyright claims. We have the GameDeveloper.com articles. This one we already talked about. State of Survival really being in the absolute worst position to say social pressure opens the doors to game addiction. And yeah, I don't want to get into a big rant as far as how I don't believe there really is any reason to worry about anything called game addiction. That's something parents make up to complain about their kids ignoring them. They used to say that the exact same thing about reading and writing and doing math, and it's just like parents don't understand. I don't know if we covered this. The Smash director Sakurai reveals an early prototype of footage for Smash Brothers, which this is a few minutes. You can kind of see what an early prototype would have looked like before they put the characters in it, and the Mario characters, and then the Nintendo characters. And I imagine Nintendo would have absolutely said no many times without them really cutifying it and making it more of a kid's game and more Nintendo friendly. Sega opens marketing subsidiary in Singapore to drive global expansion. There's another GameDeveloper.com article. Steam has topped 30 million concurrent users to set an all-time peak. Yep. Which I don't know if there really was a big reason as to why people started playing Steam. There was kind of a trademark / hint that Valve may release a new game in a new series. What was that one called? Neon Black or something? Neon Prime, I think was the name of it. But overall, you've just got like Counter-Strike Go, Dota, PUBG Battlegrounds, Apex Legends, and Lost Ark. That's the top players, so it's not really like there was a great new game that came out. Everybody is pretty much hating on the Batman game and has already forgotten about it and not mentioned it at all. That is just going to be immediately forgotten as a failure. But the good news, I guess, this time is that they didn't get so many people hyped and so many people pre-ordered in the Gotham Knights game that we're seeing massive amounts of refunds. Sony has removed expiration dates from PlayStation Plus games. Sony's made clear uh, games would leave PlayStation Plus since the service relaunched back in June, but now those expiration dates are gone without any explanation. Which I wouldn't be surprised if that isn't just a visual change and the games still do disappear. Although it wouldn't be a terrible thought if you did just get to keep the games forever. That's more in line with what people expect and want. Certainly. And then we have a new controversy, so we can just move on to the next one. In that Disco Elysium's co-creator has filed a lawsuit against the developer ZA/UM. Robert Korvitz was the lead designer of Disco Elysium and helped found its developer ZA/UM. After allegedly being forced out, he's taking his former employee to Estonian court. Which, yeah, that's why you never have a partner. Is that you, and if anything, that's why you never even sell shares. Is because eventually somebody somewhere is going to want to try and force you out of your own business, and you're not going to be happy about it, almost certainly. Alright, so we got some fall list games here. Wildfire Swap. 95% positive. Little puzzle game. It's been as low as $5.99, which is too expensive, but I'm not going to really consider that. It's not particularly the most relevant game, but I'll put it on the wish list. Here we have Wildfire Ticket to Rock, which is probably a Western game just trying to be drawn in kind of an anime style visual novel focusing on a rock band. But unfortunately no relevance. It is just English only. So yeah, we have to say no to that. There's nobody that played it. And if anything, that's just a highlight of the problems of visual novels. There's just too many of them and not enough stand out or get enough promotion or advertising. Wild West Crops, I think, falls into this same category in that there's just too many platformers, and even though this looks slightly interesting, once again has really no relevancy, so bye-bye to that. Wild West and Wizards is 77% positive. I kind of feel like I'm going to say no to this game, though. It looks just a little too asset flippy. Is it a VR game? No. $14.99. It's been sold as low as $1.49. English full audio, single player only. Yeah, I just don't think that there's enough visual polish here to justify putting that in the wish list. Wild Earth Africa. I'll give some more time to. I'd like it to be good. It probably isn't going to be good. Wild Bafo is a shooter clone with no relevancy. I can't immediately think of a better version of this game that I've seen on the wish list or fall list, so I'm going to leave this, but almost certainly there is a better version of this where it is an arcade shooter experience, although actually having an arcade shooter experience and not having a gun zapper, which I guess if I was rolling in cash I'd like to buy one of those, but then also that's not really realistic for most players, so I'd just be reviewing this not that relevant game. You could probably look at the reviews, but there's not enough to really trust them. I'm gonna give this more time, even though it's already from 2020. Wigmund, open world fantasy RPG with a unique real-time combat playstyle. $5.99, English full audio. It looks good enough. There are some negative reviews here. If I was just focused on the negative, I'd say no, but we're at 70%. You know what? This is still new. Let's give it some more time. It's not saying it's in early access, but just giving it more time may give me a better percentage. 70% really is too low. Wife Quest here. Retro platformer. Side-scrolling game with gorgeous pixel art. It's not an adult game. Doesn't have any mature content. Warning. Light nudity, sexual content such as sensual acts and clothes, and fantasy action. Interesting. And see, this is kind of the other problem though with the adult store, is that Valve really didn't go back and look at their older games and really isn't enforcing anything. You would think that something that has mature content warning should be forced into the adult store no matter what, just to fill out the adult store. But or, you know, it's odd that Steam doesn't have any pop-up questions. You don't see this on Amazon.com either, but it is a little odd that there isn't a option here to say, should this be in the adult store, yes or no? Do you think this is a good game? There's like no survey feedback that they as a storefront seek to try to improve the experience. As far as the feedback of Steam and Valve is concerned, if you buy the game and don't refund the game, then that's a good experience for the player, but that's way too surface level. Plenty of people buy a game and then don't play it, don't review it. There's nothing really focusing. I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted watching the video here. Let me just close that tab. Yeah, plenty of people buy games and then just don't bother to review it, and there's nothing asking people to review it to help other people make better decisions. This game, Winnie, is 91% positive. It's a free game. It's English only, so putting that on the wish list is easy enough. Wide Open. It's another one of these racer games. 100% positive. It looks a little bit different as far as the way it's being visually depicted. Still in early access. I guess I'll give it more time. And then Wide Ocean, Big Jacket. Again, this is a game that's been as low as $1.99. That is, $1.99 is probably worth it a lot more. But I cannot argue with a mob rule of 202 people saying very positive experience there. Alright. Let's see. Game is still listed that has stolen art. Cyan had a video where one of the guys who is in charge of Cyan and someone else who worked on Abduction talk about Abduction and play it. If you want to check it out, they don't say anything amazingly interesting, but it is kind of an interesting developer's commentary 6 years after Abduction came out. They never, I think, really planned to do anything more with Abduction. LibRetro says RetroArch now has over 600,000 unique RetroArch users on Steam, and that a new version is coming. Hashtag RetroArch Steam. Hashtag emulation. Hashtag Steam Deck. So we know where their focus is. The Pieboy DMG has come out with a new case, which is a more Nintendo DS style case. It's not a Game Boy that would be in a portrait mode. It is now turned 90 degrees and still kind of feels like a big Game Boy and looks like a big Game Boy, but it is got the screen in the middle and it's horizontal landscape mode. It has 2 analog sticks, and you put in a Raspberry Pi 4. I imagine they are not really supporting even a 3B Plus to be put in it. Hopefully the Raspberry Pi 5, if it ever comes out, would come out. But honestly, I don't have 100% faith that a Raspberry Pi 5 would be much more powerful than a 4, to the point where any more emulation using a Raspberry Pi is going to happen. You're getting up to Nintendo 64 code working pretty good on a Raspberry Pi 4 and PlayStation 1, maybe PlayStation 2, and PlayStation Portable games. And now that you have 2 analog sticks, there is room to actually play Nintendo 64 games and some of the later games. But unless it really is going to stop there, I think we've hit a plateau as far as emulation on those devices, and the prices are only going to get higher and higher, to the point where it's going to make more sense to just have a Steam Deck and do that instead. Yeah. So we may have hit the maximum there, and I wouldn't be surprised if there isn't nothing more that can happen. Here we have, well, I was looking at Hideki Kamiya's Twitter, and he retweeted a cosplayer here showing the boss and the snake from Metal Gear Solid 3 cosplay. That's not what I was trying to point out, though. The more important thing here is Hideki Kamiya with Jim Ryan, the president of Sony Interactive Entertainment, or Sony of California as I call it. He's also wearing a Beatles t-shirt. I think that says Beatles. I may say something else, but I would not suspect that he's doing anything with the Beatles. I definitely would suspect that this shows that they still have a close relationship, and that there very possibly might be a bit of exclusivity in Hideo Kojima's next game. It might be exclusive to the PlayStation first. It might be exclusive for a long time. Let's see. Here's that game Wildlife. It's W-I-L-D. I thought it was W-Y-L-D. Nope. I don't want to show too much here, and certainly this could just be all a scam. I've never heard of this game as far as like a second adult game, if a Second Life type adult game. They call it an X-rated RPG game. It's definitely, when watching the videos, a lot of adult content, but then there's also just a lot of wandering around forested areas using the Unreal Engine 4, which probably means that they'll jump to Unreal Engine 5. It oddly has like survival mechanics and first person shooting mechanics and like just stuff that you would not really expect. That you would kind of expect that it would be its own separate game, or that it would have a gameplay element. Or that you would really expect it not to have a gameplay element at all. And yet, there is hunting and survival stuff. And they're going far too far in most of these screenshots that I'm not showing you, that are just straight up pornographic. Here's another character, a bird-like character. They're going too far into the adult content aspect to cut it out at the last second and try and sell it as a censored game. Let's see. Mr. Beast, the YouTube jobs as a Twitter feed, pretty much never tweets, or I never see them. But here you can see, like, Mr. Beast for his Beast Reacts channel of 19.8 million subs is looking for a full-time remote video editor. Same is true for Mr. Beast Shorts. Now, so this really is just a case of them posting YouTube jobs on Twitter, mostly Mr. Beast hiring. TubeBuddy looking for people for a thumbnail designer, which really highlights things. So I guess if you wanted to be if you really wanted to work as on YouTube but didn't want to do all the work yourself, you might be able to work with a bigger content creator that might get you somewhere, get you some experience and some money. Almost certainly I would suspect that these guys are paying very little. Even the biggest of YouTubers are going to try and pay very little. $100 to $300 per project for making a thumbnail is not incredibly low, compared to like $65 per project. But even at that, that's a lot of money for somebody like me that would say, like, as much as I might say per project, what would a per project for me mean? It would mean a lot more thumbnails than most, because I have 20-30 videos per game I cover. But yeah, I guess that's a place to check out if you wanted to cut your teeth on being a YouTube content creator without actually being a YouTube content creator. Do I even need to do a Duel Live? Yes, I do. So let's hop into that. And then I'll scroll down my Twitter feed, and we may have gotten a little bit lucky because we saved a little bit of time, but we really didn't save as much time as we have in the past when it's just a less busy day and I have less to rant or talk about. So we're still going to go about 3 hours, but that's better than 3 hours and 40 minutes or 4 hours. Let's see, YouTube Gaming talking about Outlast coming out in 2013. I guess once again proving that YouTube Gaming is just out of touch. There's a lot of promotion for the game The Quarry. Let's see. Maybe Helena Taylor has now released a second statement, but I don't know. Apparently this has been updated, so I guess we'll talk about it on Wednesday. As far as the ban of the English voice actor, still putting out statements. Here's the YouTube updates. Ambient mode, pinch to zoom up to 8x, a more precise seeking when you're already fast forwarding, a darker mode, rounded buttons and thumbnails, which inherently, if you had anything right in the corners of your thumbnails, those have just kind of be clipped off. But I imagine there aren't that many people that actually do have things right in the corners. People with like squirt red borders around their thumbnails might get the edges clipped off. I guess the idea here is that the Quarry received this new DLC which dresses the characters in 1950s costumes, but it's only free until Halloween, which means you have to, I assume, own the game before that point. You can't just claim the DLC and not own the main game. That's how it tends to be, the way things go on Steam, at least. Alright, let's continue scrolling down and we're pretty much done. Apparently, Sega Singapore will undertake local market research and lead to future operations in Southeast Asia. Which, boy, does that feel like 2 or 3 decades too late to just start to investigate selling. Japanese companies may very well be getting a little desperate as far as realizing that they can't just stay in business selling to Japanese people in Japan, which has been definitely an attitude that a lot of Japanese companies have adopted, anime in particular. Was overpricing things, overcharging $60, $70 for 2 or 3 episodes on DVD. But yeah, I guess that's it. There's not any other news that needs to be talked about. I could open a 10-pack of legacy cards, but I'm not even going to bother. Alright, well, let's get my mouse cursor in the right position. That's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wish list. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.